I actually have 1 minute too, but probably by the time I finish talking, it'll be 6 o'clock. So welcome everyone to the October 7th, 2025 Board of Education Workshop. We have all trustees participating. As you can see, Trustee Alicia is zooming in with us, so she'll be able to participate, which is fine with the law because we are not passing any resolutions tonight. So thank you, Amina, for your willingness to participate while you're out of town. So with that, we are going to start our meeting, and we have one item of public communication. So I'm going to invite Mr. Walter Cook to come up and address the board. He is addressing us on a non-agenda item.
Thank you for your time. Be brief. I came here a couple of months ago to complain about the playgrounds. I just wanted to come back to you and thank you for getting Hamilton up and running. It's a lot of fun. She came home covered in sand before it gets too nasty. So happy about that. The other thing I wanted to come to you, come and talk about is I had a great conversation the other day about educational metrics, and it got me thinking about, we have sort of two objectives. One is excellence, which we can see in proficiency and all of that. The other is equity. And I was thinking about how we can use what's available easily to measure the equity. And in the public use MSTEP file, there's a 25th percentile and a 75th percentile. And just looking at some of the schools, there's some correlation, but it's not perfect between those that have excellent median MSTEP scores as well as low interquartile range. Just a moment to brag, Hamilton has the lowest interquartile range in the district this past year. But looking back to like pre-pandemic, Bemis actually had the highest, both the highest median and the lowest interquartile range. So as you're thinking about strategic plan metrics for this upcoming year, maybe think about something along those lines. There's a couple different ways you can measure it. Standard deviation. I think interquartile range of the scale scores would be something you could average over the grade bands and have something meaningful. It's not available for PSAT, only for MSTEP.
Okay,
So thank you.
great. Thank you, Mr. Cook. Appreciate it. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to our next item on business services. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Cordell.
You. Then, do you want sorry, do you want to talk about your ELD purchase? Sure. Yeah. Did I catch you off guard there? You'll be able to explain it much better than I would. So. I'll put it up over there for them too. Can we pull up your memo? That's better.
Well, next week, I'm Shari Hollis. I was the former principal of Hill Elementary School, and I've moved roles to the supervisor for ELD K-12. I don't usually get to a new role and ask for money right away, but here we are. So please be kind. I was not here for the pilot of this language power curriculum that we're asking for today, but I understand that the team of specialists spent a year piloting materials and meeting with curriculum development people from across the from different curricular areas within ELD, and they landed on language power. Language power, what's difficult about a curriculum is that there's never a one size fits all for everything, but this is certainly as good as we can get in this regard. What we're looking for is some continuity between all elementary schools with what we are providing our students. And we didn't have that. And curriculum does allow us that opportunity to make sure that across all 13 elementary schools, preschool included in there, that we're doing the same thing for our students who are newcomers, all the way to those that leave our program. The quote that I received from Language Power, at first, it was going to be about $90,000. But here on sale, just kidding, it's not really on sale. But finding another way to pay for that with Title III grants. We're just asking for the kits for classroom teachers, and then all of the supplemental materials and newcomer materials that come with it will be paid for out of the grant. So you're just paying for that portion of that. The vote also includes an opportunity for specialists to work with their staff developers and make sure that we're having some job embedded PD to make sure we're not just getting the thing and then it sits in a corner or we're not sure how to use it. So I'm excited about them to be able to engage in that way as well.
The recommendation will come next week will be for these particular materials, 22,000 coming out of general fund and the rest coming out of Title III. That is allowable out of Title III.
Go ahead.
So what did we used to have before this?
We had the REACH curriculum, but that became outdated. Every so often we have to update with WIDA standards. And so REACH had not updated theirs at the time of the pilot. They have since updated their materials, but the difference between Language Power and REACH is that REACH is intended for sheltered instruction. So if we had schools that had a larger numbers of ELD newcomers, then we might think of using a REACH curriculum. That's also why it comes with such a hefty price tag as well.
So REACH is far more expensive than this.
Correct.
What's the rate difference?
It's far more expensive. You want me to tell you the difference in price?
Yeah.
Okay, it would be like $1 million.
Okay, well,
Yeah, because
and we
Because
used
it
to have
involved-
that.
because it involves, well, we didn't have the whole system. That's also part of it. We were cherry picking from different things that we had. And this is the first time that we'll have, in a long time we've had before, that we'll have a full curriculum.
While I was looking at this, I was trying to understand what this kit might look like and how does that help? I mean, does it have different packages for students coming from different language backgrounds? Or can you give us a little bit insight into what exactly does it have?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So similar to, are you familiar with LLI kits that we use in our district?
No, I am
Okay.
not.
So while it is prescribed and there's a script of things per unit, well, I guess let me start again. First, there's a newcomer kit. That's very different than the other two kits. There's kit A and kit B. The newcomer kit specifically is designed to welcome students into schools in America. There's information about our Constitution and all of those things in there. Also with what it means to be in school in America, and that's included in an actual backpack. There's tips for parents and there's like a 20-day kind of welcome to the country that they go through. I say 20 days, it could be 30, but you get the idea. It's very specific. Now within there's some autonomy because when students are newcomers, they come with different backgrounds and different needs. So there is an opportunity for a teacher to pause those and say, okay, today you're going on a field trip and that might not be part of the newcomer curriculum, but we're going to pause this. There's enough scaffold within that you'd be able to teach them the curriculum or teach them the vocabulary and the things that might come along with going on a field trip for the first time. Then we move on to kit A. That's for students that are, their proficiency level is, I think, 1 to 2 proficiency level. I don't like to call students like by a number proficiency level, but the WIDA does give us, so they give us those matrix. I would rather talk about ability, but students at 1 and 2, that's what that kit is designed for. Same thing, there are lessons and also supplemental materials, books that look like the books that peers would be reading, but specifically at an access point for multilingual learners.
And when you say kits, these are physical kits?
Physical kits. There's two things. There's physical kits, that's what you're purchasing. And then there's the supplemental kits. Some of those include consumables, and those are paid for out of the grant. Anything that's consumable though is also, we have digital access to. So while the grant pays for that, and then now all of those works are consumed, we can print out those materials and teachers will still have access to them.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm not very familiar with the district service model for K-5. Could you explain what that looks like and then how these materials specifically fit into that model?
That's a great question. Really stretching my new role. Get warm.
I understand you're new, so if
No,
there's,
I've
if
got
there's
the
something
question.
that you're not sure of, like, feel free to like, just jump with us later, yeah.
Yes, okay, I will. I definitely will. But I think that that's a complicated question. And the reason is that we're working through, the state of Michigan just gave us some new guidelines for multilingual learners. A certain amount of minutes that we're expected as a school district are required as a school district to provide students with. And, we have a 4-year time period in order for us to be in compliant within that guidance.
Okay.
I'm just giving you that background because right now what we do is not necessarily 100% compliant with where we hope to be.
Okay.
Our model in elementary right now is that students are serviced with push-in and pull-out support from our specialist, very similar to what a literacy specialist or math specialist would pull out. It's important to note, though, that ELD is a tier 1 intervention. So push-in is really the model that is recommended. We right now are servicing the number of minutes that students are pulled out or pushed in is dictated by how they score on the WIDA and their proficiency level. Again, the MDE has given us guidance and very specific minutes that we're supposed to be servicing students in either way, either push out or pull in. I look forward to coming back, Audra, and telling you exactly what that model is. I think that that's really important. And as we do some work as a team, we'll be ready to do that.
And so kind of when you come back, I guess, kind of like, here's where we're at now, and then maybe kind of like a picture of like what you're moving toward.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right now, there have been such great people before me that have done such great things, but everything that they did lived here.
Yeah.
And they're not
Yeah.
not here. And so what's important right now is that we're now creating, continuing that story, and we want to be able to share it with all of you because our multilingual learners are such an important part of this school district. And we want to make sure that we're celebrating them from beginning to end and that everyone knows how we support them.
And then, and this can be kind of, I guess, maybe not necessarily answered right now too, but as it sounds like you're going through this change process, like my question would be then, is this curriculum that's going to be purchased now that fits the needs now going to be okay in 4 years? Or are we going to have to revisit and possibly make some tweaks, or maybe you don't even know the answers?
I want to look at you and say emphatically, I don't think that we'll be coming to you for quite some time.
Okay.
But that would be silly for me to say when I'm new in this role.
Yeah.
I'm very confident with the work that was done before me to make this recommendation. And I'm confident with what we plan to do moving forward. I do not foresee us needing to ask for more for quite some time. They redo the WIDA standards ever so often. Language Power just redid their curriculum to prepare for that, so we won't need to.
And then with, when I read through it, it talked about needing being standards based. Does that mean like WIDA standards based, or is it state standards based, or is it a combination?
It's a combination of them. Some of our work this year is to look at how all of those align with within what we're doing, which is again, part of that, how I'm eager to come back and share that with you. Right now, there's a lot of opportunity, and I look forward to showing the data.
Right, thank you.
Sherry, about how many students were in the pilot? Do you know?
That's a really great question. It's all elementary ELD, so
Oh, so every.
all the specialists had Kit A and Kit B last year.
Okay, great.
Can I ask how many other curriculums you piloted?
There were 3 total.
Which were they?
Stephanie had you found them.
Okay.
By heart, but I can't give that information for you.
And I'm curious about timing. Like I know we have a Title III audit this year, right? Come to look at our programming in ELD. Do you think this curricular thing works in that timing? Like before we know what the audit tells us about how we're doing?
So you're asking, is it a smart idea to purchase this before we know?
Yeah.
The state of Michigan. I do think this is not, we're not the only ones that have used this curriculum. There's other areas that have used this, and it's checked with Oakland schools and kind of did my research on that end to make sure. That is a great question. I am confident, but they could say something different because things change.
Got it. And then you said other local districts are using this?
And traffic is one of them, that's, yeah.
And then can you tell me, was there parent input at all in the piloting process and in the process of like 16% of our students are ELs? So it's a pretty far reaching thing. Do you have any input from that community?
I do not have access to parent data. Where I would say, based on what I understand from the pilot, that parents were not involved. That was just the specialists and teaching and training.
Any other questions for Sherry?
Thanks, Shelby.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll have much more answers.
Okay, good luck. Furniture. For this building.
Still,
We didn't,
Yeah, she,
I thought we lost
Oh.
Anita.
No, you
Still
still lost your view out there.
not sure why.
She's still here. She'll be over there.
Yeah, there she is.
I was just at a conference all day, so I had to eat dinner while the meeting was going, so I turned the camera off. I'm here.
You missed some great tacos, Anita. It's Taco Tuesday.
I do love Taco Tuesday.
So the next item we have on the agenda here is for furniture for this building. So last meeting, we brought the construction component of this renovation for this building. That was just over 1.5 million. The total budget all in for us was 1.8 million is what we were targeting. So we were just over 1.5 at the last board meeting, which included contingency of about 140 grand. So this proposal here came in at around $240,000. So in total, we're about $1,000 higher than that 1.8. So all things considered, with the scope adjustments and everything we had, we did a lot of engineering in terms of bringing down some of the design work to get to that 1.8. So the actual bids and the pricing of the furniture actually came in pretty much in line. So hopefully with not utilizing all of the contingency, we'll be under that 1.8 mark for this building. So you can see here, the two vendors that we're using consortium pricing for, total of $240,000. And then I did include some packets for this building, just to kind of give you some ideas of what the furniture will look like. So nothing in the boardroom is changing here. This is all fairly new furniture. This will be all the conference rooms, it'll be all the workstations, offices, all of that old furniture is going to be replaced with new furniture. All these desks in the workstation areas are all going to be standable, so the whole desk will go up and down. We have a lot of people up here that are sitting all day long, so a lot of them do have kind of mobile standing desks, if you will. So this will free up a lot of desk space for them, and then the whole desk will go up. So again, just a total refresh. And then the largest part of this renovation is actually the main lobby right out there. That whole desk area is going away. It's going to open it up. Conference room is going to be added. Dedicated mail room, so we don't have to have people coming and going. Help secure the back area a little bit more, just like we do at the building level. So you can see just the various different chairs and whatnot. The chairs are very middle of the road in terms of cost. And, we had chairs here for all the staff to kind of do a survey on picking which ones they want for their desks. So, this was a pretty elaborate process in terms of picking out all the finishes and everything. We had a lot of staff input from up here in terms of the type of furniture, the color, the finishes, the fixtures, all of that. And then some things like the doors, we're not replacing doors just to save cost, so we're just gonna restain them. So they'll be stained a much more kind of like the under the owl here, a much more neutral, natural wood color. So that'll kind of just modernize it across this building. So when it's all said and done, it should look very nice, modern, updated. But again, a very minimal upgrade. About a third of the cost is the thing you're hearing right now. Hopefully that will be fixed, and then you won't hear that. That unit right now is just overpowered for this area. So they're gonna rework a lot of that to feed from the back of the building and just push air here as opposed to having it right above us where you can actually hear it. So goal is November 1st. We're moving out the day before Halloween, so we'll be over at services temporarily for 5 months, and then we'll be back here pretty much the week of spring break is our goal. So temporarily, we'll have workshops over there as well. We can do this setup over there if we want to, but we'll be over there for about 5 months.
So is our plan to just do it in the boardroom, but just set up tables to?
Yeah, just
Like this?
just like we did that one.
Yeah.
We know how to use the owl appropriately, so it'll actually record this. So, but yeah.
Okay.
So, any questions on this? It's just primarily furniture.
So, Dan, what are we doing with all the old furniture?
So right now, we're in the process of finding other places around the district that may need it. So to the extent that the furniture is still usable and in good condition, we'll try to push it into the different buildings across the district. So I know there's quite a few already that we have found homes for. So the goal is to essentially take them and a moving company will help us get it moved over to wherever we need it to go. Anything that remains, typically, if it's broken, it'll get disposed of properly, otherwise potentially donated. We have donated to trade public schools before, things like that. So we'll ensure that if there's a home for it, there will be a home. If not, it'll get disposed of. So. And then things like loose filing cabinets all up and down the corridors in the back area, those are gonna get reused too. We didn't elect to buy anything just yet. We wanted to reuse what we had because we're doing a lot of purging, shredding, that kind of thing too. So we don't want to just buy new cabinets and then fill them up with things we don't need to have. So
And did we say how old the old furniture is? How long it's been there?
it's about 20 or so years. I'd say it was like 2008 or something. Old stuff. Yeah.
And then is the space like expandable by chance? Like is do you have room for, let's say you add staff or something?
We have one additional office that is really going to be used as like an onboarding room for our employee services. So that's a potential space. And then we do have a couple extra workstations for permanent staff. So
Just needs some
for
space.
future group. Yeah.
Okay, anything else on this one? Right?
The next item is cafeteria table. So this one is very similar. We did Leonard, I believe last fall, and then Martell we did back in February. Trying to kind of hit a couple schools each year as they need them. So again, this one is the same exact type of table. The only thing that changes typically is the color of the chair and then the configuration in terms of number of seats. So it's the same brand though. It's all consortium-based pricing. So you'll see there's just different setups depending on that particular building, how they run lunch. We try to accommodate that portion of it, but again, it's all the same materials and durable quality. It's kind of the middle of the road pricing, but we want to make sure these are going to last a good 20 to 30 years. So, and then these are being paid for out of our bond funds as well.
Okay, so not food service fund, because the last
Correct.
few rounds, we actually got it from the food service fund, didn't we? You-
Those were bond, you can use food service funds. It's a little bit more of a gray area depending on how you use that space. Like if you're using if you're having non-food service related activities in there, you technically are supposed to allocate the cost between
A percentage of it.
So for us, it's just easier to focus on kitchen renovations, kitchen equipment upgrades out of food service fund. And then these we typically try to push into a bond fund. Yeah. So they'll order these as soon as we get board approval. Totals just over $46,000. And then it typically takes 4 to 5 weeks to get them. And then they'll come and swap them out for Barnard.
Okay, great.
And then technology upgrades and access control. So this one's a little bit bigger. I had to take a few notes on this one. So there's different components to this bid. So in total, you can see here with contingency, just under $2.7 million. So there's various different categories. So I'll just quickly go through. So we had structured cabling here. So the green, these are all the bids that came in. So as we go through, we have to validate the scope of that particular bid that was submitted. So in this case, we always take the lowest qualified bidder as we go through post-bid interviews. So this one was Intercom. So we have a very good relationship with Intercom. They do really good work. They do all the other systems for us, the back end cabling. So as they went through this review process and determined schedules and hours and manpower, all of that, we determined Intercom to be the lowest qualified bidder. So this is all the back-end cabling costs for all of these technology systems. So that's gonna fill all of these categories below. And then it's also touching the Troy High concession stand. We have some small cabling there that we wanted to lump in here for some of the technology that's gonna be in over there. And the second category, IP public address systems. So this is your Epic systems. So VSC is the company that is currently installing the 10. They're just about done, the 10 elementary schools. Intercom did do our 2 pilot schools, and then VSC came in and they actually won the bid for the other 10. VSC is a certified Epic installer, and our experience with them has been very positive. So the bid was a little bit higher, but the one appealing piece beyond them being the certified installer for these systems was they extended the pricing for a few more years beyond this school year. So if we have to go back in and add anything after the fact, we're going to continue to lock in that price as well. So for us, that was a pretty appealing piece as part of that bid. So that's the option that we are recommending for approval. Classroom AV, so this is just all the new classroom technology at the New Smith Middle School. So this is going to furnish that whole building, all of the classrooms with all of the audio and video equipment that would be within those classrooms. So you're going to have your large screen in the classroom, and then it's going to have all the speakers and everything. And then should have also said up here too. So this Epic amount here with VSC, that is the New Smith Middle School and Baker. So they're getting their systems now. The old Smith got theirs this past summer. We wanted to make sure they had that for Boland and Larson as they kind of go through that building. And then all of our elementary schools have it. We haven't gone to the high school level just yet, but for right now, we wanted to make sure that the New Smith is going to get it, and then Baker is also going to get it next summer too. So. And then access control. So this is the larger big category for this one. So this is going to address our district-wide access control. So these are all the badge readers at the front of every building. Essentially, every door, exterior door is going to get covered with new badge readers. So we have been working kind of a collaboration between technology and our operations team to try to unify all of these systems that we have. We have access control systems, camera software control systems. We have building management systems for the HVAC. We're trying to integrate everything into one open source platform essentially. So that is Genetec. Genetec is an open source software that works very nicely with all of these different systems. So that's largely what drove the selection of People Driven Technology, who we have a very good relationship with. They do a lot of our technology projects. They did all the Wi-Fi upgrades. But as we went through Allcom, each one of these companies essentially presented their own take on what we should do based on interviewing with us. And so we kind of left it a little open-ended and then went in and researched each one individually. And then that's largely what drove the decision to select People-Driven Technology. So Allcom selected a very proprietary system that we felt was not open source enough to be able to connect everything. And then the second one there, they also proposed a very basic proprietary type system that could not integrate with other systems that we have, which left us with the next option, People Driven Technology, which did have the open source Genetec software. So now we're going to be able to integrate in all of our camera hardware, all of our access card control readers, and then eventually we're looking at the building management systems for temperature regulation, all of that. We're trying to connect everything into one system. And then all new card readers. So all of our buildings are getting new hardware installed except for Athens, Boland, and Larson. Those are major redesigns going on right now. So we're holding off on those for now. And then Baker will be included with that round. There was a lot of other electrical work and things going on over at Baker that we just had to hold off temporarily. But that will also be included. They also did get newer hardware about 6 or 7 years ago. So the hardware is still fairly new. So we figured let's continue to use that, get some more useful life out of it. And then down here was the video surveillance. So this one here would cover the actual hardware for the cameras over at New Smith Middle School. And then you can see, so that's the $233,000 the 244,000, that was a mandatory alternate, so that was essentially to upgrade the servers for the cameras across the district. So the reason that we ended up going with this combination here was some of these mandatory alternates were just not what we had asked for, so we had to reject those bids. So, and then the only other feasible one was MGIS, but they didn't spec the Genentech software for us, so we had to reject that one too, so. So those are all of the bids, so it's kind of a myriad of different projects across the district that we tried to lump together just to try to appeal better to these different vendors in hopes of securing lower pricing.
And how will you implement this work?
So a lot of it's gonna take place next summer.
Okay.
So a lot of the card readers they'll be able to start installing over the course of the school year, since it's just on the exterior of the buildings. A lot of the cabling is just gonna go in the evenings work, just after school's out, they'll be able to run all the cabling for us. So it'll be ongoing throughout the year. And then certain projects, obviously like the Smith Middle School, as soon as they're at a point where they'll be able to run all the cables before drywall's up, but then they'll just have to come back in and install the physical cameras at the next year.
So, any reason for updating or upgrading the card readers? Are they not working or they just get old? Are we just doing because we are updating other things?
Yeah, so we have a lot of buildings, like Troy High doesn't really have any. So we have a lot of buildings that just don't have any. We have a lot that are very old that aren't compatible, so we want to upgrade them. And then the ones like at Baker, we have a few buildings, Athens included in that, that are on an older proprietary system. So they're still newer, they're within 5 to 10 years old, but it's a proprietary system that can't integrate into anything else. So if hardware fails or software, you have to rely on that specific vendor, which we have found problematic at times. You can't get a quick replacement, so to speak, because you have to wait for that specific hardware. So we're gonna hold off, like I said, on Athens, Bowen, Larson, and Baker, which have those newer proprietary systems. Get a little more time out of them over the next few years, and then replace them with what's being replaced at the other buildings right now.
Other than Troy High, which building does not have access card readers?
I think all of our elementaries do. Athens has some, but not a lot. Troy High, I know, has the fewest. So Troy High is included in this to make sure they get up to par with what they need. And I'd have to check, I can confirm which, so Schneider Electric is the proprietary ones we have, like at Baker and Athens. I'd have to confirm what other buildings
How
have
about the
that.
elementary? What do they have?
They have an older, so basically a secondary and elementary, we're on two different platforms essentially. So with the new Smith coming on, obviously, we don't have to worry so much about them. They're gonna have to get new ones. But our secondary buildings, the way that you could map things, there was much more customization with the Schneider system. So elementaries run on a very basic system essentially. So all the elementaries have older, more basic functionality that would be replaced as part of this. And then our secondary buildings are gonna get updated either through this or when we address their larger projects in the next couple of years.
So with the systems we have today, if I'm, say, an elementary teacher that moves between buildings, do I have to have two different access cards or is there?
The access cards can be programmed, but they have to program it in two separate systems.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like the reader itself will work, you just have to load what the serial number from that reader is into both systems. So we've been managing two separate systems depending on which building you're in.
Okay, so ultimately the vision is you're going to be on one central system that you can move people's access very easily if they
Yep.
need to have access to multiple buildings.
Yep, and it's really a collaboration with employee services and tech as well. So the process is gonna be you onboard an individual. They are then sent, the information is sent to technology. Technology is gonna map them in the Active Directory, and then that is gonna feed to all of these systems.
Yeah.
So that way they can be programmed automatically to a specific building based on how they're coded on the employee services end. And then upon termination, you can then just go in with one button in Active Directory and shut them off across all the platforms. So
Yeah.
we're trying to get to a point where it's just easier to manage and we don't have any gaps in our security.
Okay.
So two questions. You said all exterior doors will have card readers? Like elementary is just a few. Now will be lots.
Card readers and or sensors. So this Epic system has exterior door sensors for us. So those will get all covered. Some exterior doors beyond the main entrance depending on the nature of what that door is used for, we'll have a badge reader installed as well.
Just think about the recess and stick.
Yeah, like a classroom exterior door is not.
Less of that would be good.
Yeah, but a back room to a mechanical room or a delivery room, like right near a kitchen or something like that would have one.
And then just to make, because this isn't my expert area, Genetech.
Genetech, yeah.
Genetech, that is the like software that's uniting it all.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so it's very
I understand
open
it.
source, so all the hardware we have Access Cameras is the brand.
Okay.
They can easily integrate into the Genetech software.
Okay.
So now in one system, you can see the access of all the doors, and then you can see cameras, and then you can actually get them to talk to each other to alert us for different scenarios.
Like lock a door.
Yeah,
Okay. And then you said that the HVAC piece is a later piece?
yeah, that's the ultimate goal is we update the hardware for all of our the equipment, I should say, for the HVAC units. We're trying to tie that into this system as well. So that in a far-fetched world, you could have somebody badge into a building, lights could automatically go on, temperature could be adjusted to occupancy, things like that. And then likewise, we also have ML Schedules. It's our scheduling software that we are integrating with buildings and rentals that then can integrate into the software. So now you schedule a rental or an event, it automatically sends the information to the building management system, which then turns on the air conditioner to heat.
Or the lights?
Yep, or lights,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
things like that. So trying to automate a lot of this.
I love it. Sounds like right for savings, and energy.
While there are a lot of advantages, one disadvantage could also be once somebody hacks into the system,
Yeah,
they have
yeah,
access
that's
to
right.
everything.
Mhm.
So are there any like firewalls to help prevent that from happening?
Yeah, and all of that, it's all locally stored too, which is nice. So it's not in a cloud beyond our control. But there are different methods of getting in terms of like multi-factor authentication and things like that. But yeah, we partner now with Trend Micro. So Trend Micro, currently kind of monitors all of our servers. So now we're into that next phase of getting them involved in monitoring all of our access points as well. So we have like a unified dashboard now to essentially track any exterior threats from a cyber perspective.
And one, I don't know if it's a weird question, I don't even know if you can say it or not, but when, when someone badges into the building,
Mhm.
is there somewhere where it says, oh, IS Fox is trying to get into Athens or something like that? It's like,
Yep.
like I can't give to Stephanie and be like, here, you can go in.
Right, yeah, you see that on the back end currently, so we'll continue to see that, but it'll just be more interconnected
Right.
to the other systems. But yes, you do see like a history log.
No more breaking into buildings.
I was thinking,
No,
about
no need
Right.
your access card to Stephanie.
Let me try. I know, you're great about your cars.
Oh, you can. All right,
That's good.
good. All right,
Thank you.
Yep.
policy.
So this one, there was just two policy updates in here, so back in July, in August, they had pushed these through. So the first one relates to some graduation requirements. This one is basically just slightly modified. And then this all legal requirements language, so. And then the more specific guidelines here. This is the administrative regulation that they're just recommending in red there, a slight change.
So this is the new requirement.
FAFSA.
Having to do the FAFSA, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this has been a particular senator has been interested in getting 100% participation with FAFSA. And it has not been successful. This is, well, he hasn't been as successful, but it made inroads. And so to that end, the goal is, it was going to be a graduation requirement that everyone must. And in conversation, we pushed back and said, that's just not realistic. We're not going to be able to require all families to comply. So they have since provided other provisions that will allow for some opt-ins, opt-outs of FAFSA. I mean, on the surface, not a bad idea to encourage more families to take advantage of FAFSA. But when we were able to share with the legislator, it's Camilleri's his name, he's in the Dearborn area. We were able to explain to him the challenges associated with that from a school standpoint. High school, trying to chase after folks filling out FAFSA, they finally relented and added some additional kind of back out provisions into enrollment.
But this is still gonna be a bigger administrative burden. I think.
Yes, yes. In theory, it's not a bad idea, but
No.
Yeah.
Well, and, you know, there are families who are gonna opt out of this because why fill it out if you aren't, if you know you're not gonna be eligible?
or if I just don't want my personal information out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons why something might, I know Audrey had a more specific
Yeah,
question.
I kind of like pull that down a little bit here. So the two bullets there, so
Yeah.
it looks like, okay, the parent can fill out the waiver for, got it. But this next one, it says student is unable to complete the FAFSA because of privacy concerns. So like, what does that look like and how? I'm taking it, we either have to have documentation that they completed it or that there's some sort of form. So is this like a student would complete a form or do we maybe not know yet?
Or what is the,
What's below it?
yeah, what was below that, or
All following.
okay.
I could see this being for a student who just doesn't want to have their personal information from his families.
I'm just wondering, like, because it looks like there's the parent component with this waiver, but then there's the student has some like agencies
Agency within it
to do, like, to not do this. But what are our requirements in terms of like documenting, was it this or was it this?
We'll get some clarification on that.
Okay.
We'll ask Kevin some clarification. This is technically reading one,
Oh,
so we've got some
this
time.
is-
This is considered first
got it.
reading.
Okay.
So we can get some clarification and provide that for you prior to the second reading, which would be at next week's meeting, or next week's meeting. I hope we can get clarification in advance of that.
I also want to understand, because right now for FAFSA, the school doesn't get any private information. It is just the form is filled
Yeah.
on the FAFSA website.
Yep.
And then you just get a little completed thing,
Right.
which the school gets, and that's how you get credit or graduation credit. So I don't know what the privacy problem is here.
Well, I think it's more like families submitting what they consider private information to the federal government.
But they don't.
They don't want to complete the form that will go to the federal government.
Okay, I see.
They have no interest in taking advantage of federal subsidies, and they just don't want the federal government tracking
Well,
their.
all that information is when you file your taxes, is already there.
Yes.
90%, not all of them, you're right.
But the Department of Education doesn't have access to that information,
Like,
so,
that's
yes.
Treasury.
No, I mean, all the government information is theoretically up to now has been siloed. So the different departments don't have access to information from the other ones. I do have a question, Rich. And I didn't quite understand the beginning. Did this pass in the legislature as a requirement, or are we getting some benefit for implementing this policy?
Well, there is some benefit, there is some finance, there's some competitive monies available if you have a certain percentage of students. I believe if you meet a certain percentage of families filling out the FAFSA, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but
Okay.
we'll get some clarification. We'll send out some clarification.
But has this been passed as a requirement at the state level or no?
Yeah,
It passed in the last legislative session, not even this one, the previous one.
yeah, and it was meant to be implemented, I think, starting 26-27, I think it was the implementation date. So they're trying to get ahead of it from a policy standpoint. So we'll get some clarification. Good questions.
That's maybe a rough estimate of what we would have.
Another reach.
What is that?
What is that?
That's the FAFSA money from the state.
So that's what we get for getting our kids to do it.
Our allocation potentially based on this, but I don't know. Again, how they would disperse allocations.
Yeah.
So that's
So-
assuming it's just straight equal per pupil payments.
Is it like a pot that says if you meet a certain percentage, you get all of it?
I'd have to read the actual bill language to see, but they allocated essentially $10 million statewide
Okay,
for this initiative.
And
One
that money,
time.
yeah, one time.
Yeah.
And it would be, even if you had majority of your district opting out.
That's what I don't know what if there's gonna be like an application process, if it's competitive or if there's certain requirements. That they'll always, after the governor signs, then they'll figure it out, set their specs.
We'll get some clarification before next week for sure, so that everybody's comfortable. We can also pass on this one for now too. We don't have to, but we've got plenty of time on this one because it's not in effect until 26, 27. So,
And that's the administrative right piece.
Yeah.
The only approval piece really right now is this small one.
yeah,
Yeah, the
then
policy, I guess, is what the policy is.
right.
And the AR, we can then just bring
Yeah,
back.
so administrative rights.
We'll get some clarification on those.
Okay.
Fair enough.
So then the other one was the August update, so. So this one back in July, the board had to pass that resolution, basically attesting to normal salary increases. This is the other part of it where it's basically formalizing the need for districts to have employees' salary schedules for all employees. So we were selecting option 2, I believe. So basically, that's where we kind of determine them internally and then make them available for the Board of Education to review for anybody that is outside of a collective bargaining agreement.
just for my purposes, what percentage of our staff are outside the collective bargaining?
It's less than 10%.
Yeah, what do you have, like,
About 50 administrators-ish, 50, 55-ish. Out of,
So only the administrators?
yeah, and some non-reps, yeah.
there's
Okay, okay. The teaching staff and the support staff, they're all 100%?
It would be less than 10%.
no questions on that one. Then the other one, the rest of it was just administrative regs. So there was just some updated language here, with some clarifications.
and who's our facilitator? Is that John? It says, does that say facilitator? No, physician.
Position.
Oh, to the, what I get.
I think this one, we'll just have to talk either Chris or Christine.
Yeah, I think we're gonna put Christine in there.
So we'll bring this one finalized, and send out the ARs as well.
What will how will this policy be communicated to our parents? So that they know that they have the right to submit an objection? Like, it doesn't really say in there. Newsletter,
You could do it however.
have been thought about, yeah.
I don't, does the policy say I have to go back to look at the policy, so if we.
It's just that we will, hear parents. I'm just thinking about, like, in the past, I've had parents come forward specifically like, about elementary specials, like, music is a no-go, as an example, like due to a religious, exception. But I think it would be inappropriate that parents understand that they are legally allowed to say that. Because that, for some folks, culturally or otherwise, it's a struggle to be like, I don't want to come tell you I can't do music, even though my kid can't do music.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious about how that's going to be
I will
communicated.
talk to Kendra.
So Stephanie, are you asking about how we are communicating the change to our policy to the
Right.
parents?
So that parents know they have the right to ask for an exception,
Okay,
you know, because that's what this says, is that parents have the right, they have to reach out to whoever that is to say, hey, I can't religiously or whatever, my student can't do music or whatever else it is.
do we,
So they understand that they have that right.
And are there valid reasons and invalid reasons for objection, right? And we have to explain those or what?
I think the point is that the parents have a right to object, provide the reason, and then this is the process.
Yes.
Happen, but,
Okay, so just informing the parents of this change.
That they have the right.
But this is an AR, right?
This, there's a policy that goes along with it. So I'll talk to Kendra about that specific policy.
But we haven't changed the policy. This is just a change to the AR.
Right, yeah, it just says, it basically, who's gonna hear the appeal, basically.
So
And then,
why do we need a board for an AR change?
you don't,
You don't.
this is just informing you that
Just
we're,
information.
yeah, we're
Okay.
changing that administrative regulation as well.
Next one was just pertaining to field trips. So this is not a required one, but it's just helpful, I think, to implement a more formalized process. For approving field trips, we get them all the time, especially if there's overnight field trips, things like that, so. Like it's a good practice to have something a little more formalized in terms of an AR. And that'll help, I think, give our building administrators something as well to lean on.
Would this be a place to put in what happens if a student doesn't go on a field trip? Like that we can't say you have to stay home, we have to provide appropriate education, although, you know, because maybe there's, and not to go back to this issue, but maybe there's a thing where a family's like, hey, that's not a trip I will make it take. I'm not sure if this is the place for it.
That's already there, right? Right now?
I don't know. This is the administrative regulation. I don't.
Yeah. I'll talk to Chris about that. Okay. Thanks, Dan.
All right. So for next week, it'll just, we aren't going to, see the.
Well,
because
I
we don't-
drafted out just the policy.
Yeah, right.
That'll
We
be for the
don't-
board meeting, but then we'll include the
Yeah.
ARs completed
Yeah,
for your reference.
yeah, for our reference.
Yes, and
We
any
won't be
feedback.
voting on ours, 'cause that's our job.
I'll make sure we get answers to those particular questions.
There was only one policy change, which is the first reading. So nothing will come.
Two specific policies that.
Yeah, two.
Yeah, the
specific
that would
word
come
is
to the
for the
board
FAFSA,
next
yes,
week, right,
the
yeah.
little line
And
for
the-
And
FAFSA.
I'll get clarification on the administrative regulation question.
And then we'll finalize the document with the final version of the ARs for review.
Okay. All right, thank you, Dan. So now we will move on to our teaching and learning, special education update.
So Sarah and the team are gonna join us. Provided you a brief presentation. Come to find out, it goes back to before Sarah was director that Jessica provided an update to the board at the time about our special education program. And the purpose behind this presentation is really to just kind of heighten the awareness of the board around our programming, the programming we provide, but then also to draw attention to how in many cases, in many of our programs, the numbers have grown fairly dramatically. And I just would want to draw your attention to that, primarily because, to Nancy's point at the last board meeting, it's often the board finds itself in DC advocating on behalf of Title I funding, IDEA funding. And which is really important because as we know that title or that IDEA funding continues to be less than was promised. And in fact, it's even less now than we had seen for a couple of years, nowhere near the 40%, of course, that was promised. And the highest we've seen was 18%, and it's even lower than that now. So that's important, but also on a more local level, as you have an opportunity to work with our local legislators in Lansing, that you're equipped with specific numbers around programming and the impact of programming from a personnel standpoint and how it impacts the general fund and so forth. So we're able to share some of those numbers with you that you can then take. And then I think even beyond that, at a more local level, as you're working with open schools, as you're going to OCSBA meetings, talking to them about, or talking to your colleagues at the county level about what they're seeing in their districts, because our issues are not local to just Troy. This is happening across the county, and the challenges associated with the lack of programming at the county level for more serious behavioral, specifically behavioral issues, and so forth. We really need to heighten, I think, bring that to the forefront of the conversation. And so some of these numbers, I think, will bear that out for you. So that's maybe a bigger introduction to why I felt it was good for us to look at these numbers right now, or this information right now, equip you with the information. So,
Great.
by all means, please, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for the intro and the opportunity for us to be here. I'm Sarah Smotherman. I'm the director. Just entered my third year in this position. And I think most of you know, I was a supervisor before that and a coordinator and a teacher before that. So I'm going to let Jamie and Hillary just introduce themselves quickly.
So I'm Hillary Pulliam. I am the supervisor for the preschool and Troy High School, and then track the feeder schools that go to Troy High School.
And then I'm Jamie Evans, supervisor for IA, TCC, HS, and then Troy Athens and all the feeders up to Troy. Down.
So you'll notice that will have been a change, because in the past we had elementary and secondary.
Yeah, right.
But Sarah astutely suggested that we provide an opportunity for our supervisors to have that K-12 continue. And by splitting the district that way, it really provides them to have a full understanding of families as they move through our district and the progression. So it was a good move. So
Yeah.
we appreciate Hillary and Jamie joining our team.
Yeah, I'm very excited about them joining the team and dove right into everything and been very helpful to our team so far. So our agenda is just to give you a brief overview of a high level overview of the department, but also to start with talking about the Michigan Department of Education continuum. So that's where we drive all of our, that's where we start from. And then we'll go into our own continuum here in Troy and give you some insight to all of the service providers that we have. As Dr. Machewski said, we have grown quite a bit over the last several years. So you'll get some information about that. And then our early childhood data and our students from out of district. This will be this was for me an aha moment when I was, to Dr. Machewski's point about county programming and the number of students that historically we had outside of the district, and then now those that we've either been able to pull back into the district, but that number has significantly reduced. And then just looking at some of our trends in eligibility and our number of move-ins, and the number of move-ins specifically to some really complex needs that we've had, in particular this year, but that has been an increase over time. But this year has been, and I think Jamie will talk about that, the experience that our supervisors have went through when we receive a student who has an IEP and the placement for that child. And just the number of students that we've had who have needed a more restrictive programming. And then we're going to give you just a little bit of information about our PAC. So we have a parent advisory committee that we are trying hard to get up and running and to be really effective and efficient and supportive to our community. We have a really excited group of moms right now who are in that position, being our leaders. And then we'll give you some information about our focus areas, and then some information about budget and funding that Dan will help us out with. So. Sure, am I? No. Oh, okay. So this is the Michigan Department of Education. This came out last January. It's a really nice visual to give you just information about the continuum that the state expects, that the state offers when it comes to programming. And when you're looking at general education, we always start with conversations around students in tier 1 in general education, and then we layer supports on as the data shows that we need to. The least restrictive environment has typically, if you're looking at there as the general education, the most number of students. And as you move up that continuum, you'll see that the number of students reduces significantly. So we do have students who are homebound. That's something that's managed in the special education office and coordinated. I think last year I looked at our data from last year and it looks like we had around 20. We're starting this year already with probably around 8 or 9, I believe, but that is something that we coordinate. We have staff or to teach to go into the home for those students. And then if you're thinking about starting at the bottom, where we start with gen ed, then we start with gen ed and consultation. So that might be something where a student is in the gen ed classroom and someone from the special education department is pushing into that classroom and doing consultation either with the student or with the teacher. We have supplemental instruction and services. So that could be, again, another student in the general education environment who's receiving support and specially designed instruction in that classroom setting. So where they have goals that are being addressed in that gen ed setting. The resource room program, that can be typically, and historically, people think about a resource room as a place, but actually it's a program, but that can be delivered in the general education setting as well as pull-out service in the resource room. Typically, our students in a resource room have more academic focused needs. That's not always. There's a caveat there and some gray, but typically I would say most of our students have some kind of academic deficit that requires specially designed instruction to meet their goals. The separate classroom, when we get to this slide, that is what we would consider our categorical classrooms. So those students spend much of their day in that categorical classroom. In Troy, we have I think we have a very good philosophy and sound philosophy, but also a good reputation. And our teachers really believe that all of our students should be in the general education environment as much as they can be, to the greatest extent possible. And so a high number of our students, in particular at the elementary level, that are in our categorical programs or separate classroom, as you see here, actually spend quite a bit of time with their peers. They may have different goals that they're working on, but they are spending quite a bit of time there. So, and then separate schools, that would be when we start talking about our continuum that runs outside of Troy, but trickles into the county. So the county does have programs that we can, if there's space, to the earlier comment about not having very many programs at the county level, that we can access through a process that's called the district service request process. So residential schools, we don't currently have any students who are in a residential school, but that would be something that we would work with them on. And then we have the IAES, which is the interim alternative education setting, which would be something due to a disciplinary action that we might set up services, for example, at services for that student to come into the building to receive their IEP services. So that's just an overview of the Michigan Department of Ed. And then here in Troy, our continuum overview. So we have a whole continuum of programs and services for students birth to age 26. Michigan is the only state that's required to provide students who are eligible up to 26. All of the other states go to 21. Last year we had, you can see that number there, over 1,300 students with IEPs that we provided service for. That does not include what you see down below of our birth to age 3 families. So our continuum starts at birth. So our students are our children and their families who qualify for service at that between the ages of birth and 3. If they qualify, they receive what's called an individual family service plan. And what that is, it looks a lot like parent coaching for the area of need of those children. So there's a huge emphasis on our team going into the home and providing parent coaching around what those families are experiencing and how to support their child's development in those areas of need. And then we have our 3 to 26 population of students, which is that number above. I apologize for the formatting there. I actually had adjusted it. Those bullets should be over underneath birth instead of the way that it looks like they're a part of that population. but it must not have gotten on this one. So our, those students are all, if they're eligible, they have an IEP. We provide services through the IEP. So those could look like services only, which would be social work, speech, could be teacher consultant service, OT and PT. Those are those service providers. And then we have the resource room program, which I had mentioned earlier, is typically where students with academic needs receive their specially designed instruction. So this next, and we have resource rooms in every single building. Every single building has a resource room that programs for students with academic needs. Our categorical program placement, which is what we were mentioning earlier about the growth that we've seen. Those are for, we have preschool through our Troy Center for Transition. And we have 44 program teachers right now that are servicing in those categorical programs. I think on one of the next slides, it gives you information about how many of each program that we have. But that has been a tremendous amount of growth there as well. And then, whoops, thanks, Dan. That's okay. You can go back actually if you want to for just a second. We have the homebound services and then Project Search. So we have one program of Project Search at Troy, at the Troy Orwell Health Hospital. The last 2 years before this year, we had two programs. We had one at Royal Oak, Orwell Health Royal Oak, and we had one at this one that has been established for I think over 10 years. We decided to close, unfortunately, the Royal Oak program. What has happened in the last several years is that other districts around us have started opening Project Search locations. And because our Project Search polls from multiple districts, we were starting to see some of those students trickle back to which is great for them, their home district where they had opportunity to participate in their own Project Search. So we decided to no longer operate the Royal Oak program and combine into one program. So after, I met with our teachers there and I met with the Royal Oak hospital staff, it made the most sense for our own purposes to combine and just have one program. So, and back to thinking about our categorical programs and the increase that we've had. And you can see the pictures on the side are some of the fun that our programs had at Troy Days. If you didn't know, Troy Days does an amazing job of working with us and offering a day actually before the carnival starts for the rest of the public, where they allow us to have up to 300 students and staff who are able to attend that day. I think this year we had close to 400, and they worked very closely with us on that and allowed us to increase our numbers. So it's a really amazing day, but that day is dedicated to our students who have categorical program placements. They oftentimes don't have the opportunity to participate in an event like this because it's too overwhelming for them. Their parents aren't secure in taking them out in the community, and it's just too much. So we've been really, I remember going when I was a teacher at Morse every year, and they've been doing it for a very long time. It's an amazing event. So that's some of the students that went. We have Venus is up in the top right corner. That's their level 4 program. We have a new teacher there this year, and their students. Down below is our MyKai program at Smith. So that's Jamie Lab and her program there. And then up in the top left corner are 2 of our students from Troy Union who were having some fun in the car. So our categorical programs, we have 8 sections of ECP. Our early childhood special ed programs run in half-day sections. So they have an AM and a PM. So we have 8 sections, but 4 teachers. They run 4 days a week. They have Fridays for community outings and family partnerships, as well as they do their prep, and they have a lot of IEPs on those days. So the next type of program that we have is for students with mild cognitive impairments. We have 6 of those programs. We have 2 at the elementary, 2 at the middle school, and 2 at the high school. And then we have programs for students with moderate cognitive impairments. The difference there that you might see is the level of need is much more intense for our students in the MyKai program. So they may have a lot more medical needs or adaptive adaptive needs, self-care needs. In both of those programs, what you would find is that they are primarily on most of the students, in particular, all of the students in the MOCI program, the moderate program, but most in the mild are probably on an alternate, they're on the essential elements. They're not necessarily following the same, they're on a different track than our students who are going to receive the diploma. So they'll receive a certificate of completion. They also, most of them take the MyAccess, so they take the alternate assessment. Our students with emotional impairments, we have 3 of those programs, 1 at every level. Our level 3 programs, we have 3 of those. And our level 3 and level 4 programs are part of the Oakland Schools County coding. So they offer Oakland Schools, Oakland County has their own ISD programming that aligns with the Michigan Administrative Rules for Special Education that we follow with the MDE. So a level 3 program, just to give you some context, because I'm sure when you saw this, you were wondering, what that means. Our level 3 programs typically service our students who have some pragmatic social communication needs. Academically are probably pretty close to at or even above grade level in many cases, but have some very significant challenging behavior that requires a level of crisis intervention that needs more intensive programming support. So those programs that we have, 2 of the 3 programs have teachers with an ASD certification, and the other one has a teacher with an EI certification. So they have a much more intensive focus on supporting behavior as needed, but also intentional programming for the behavior, even as a proactive support. So our level 4 programs, this is our highest number of programs. And you might think of, well, you should think of this historically as what we would think of as an ASD program. So we no longer operate as an ASD program. They are now all coded as the county level 4 program. So that it is very common characteristics you might find of students in those programs would be very significant communication, very significant behavior, very significant sensory, and some, in most cases, some pretty intensive needs when it comes to output for demonstrating their knowledge, as well as instruction in all of the content areas. So that's where we, as you can see, we have 20 of those programs, 15 at the elementary. We added 2 programs this year. We added 1 at Leonard and we added 1 at Troy High this year. I'll tell you, and Jamie will when she gets to the move-in data, that both of those new programs are just about full at this point. So because of the high number of move-ins that we have had, we knew we needed to open new programs last spring when we were talking about this, but now we're not that we're at a point of opening the program by any means, but we're at a point where thank goodness that we did, because they are now very much close to capacity because of the students that we've had move into the district. And then we have Troy Center for Transition, which has five programs. We have 5 teachers there. 2 of the programs there are very similar to how our level 4 programs operate. So Hillary is going to talk about our service providers.
Okay, so for students, to support the unique and kind of complex needs of many of our students in special education, we have different ancillary team members that can support students based on their need. We have social workers, speech pathologists, school psychs, teacher consultants, occupational physical therapists. There's assistive technology consultants that work with the district to really help teachers with our students with access to the gen ed environment curriculum. The BCBAs and BCABAs, lots of acronyms there. And we have some non-public service team members and homebound teachers. So when you look at this very comprehensive list of experts that our special education students have access to, you can see that there are a lot of social workers and speech pathologists there. And the reason for that is social workers and speech path both can give direct services. Specifically, speech paths can also be primary care or primary case managers for many students. But we also, those two specific ancillary team members also sit on our MTSS, our building MTSS teams. And so they really support holistically the building needs by looking at the interventions that students may need both in general education and special education to support those students in those different capacities. The other, the BCBA and BCABA positions there were behavior techs or people that have certifications with behavior, and that was a 31N grant position. And basically that grant was given the ability for Troy to expand its mental health supports in the school and those positions can support both general education and special education students in the school setting with some behavior, more complex mental health types of behaviors that tend to be promoted and coexist. There are non-public, so we as a public school entity are required to provide ancillary services to students who are enrolled in a non-public school settings, like a private school that are in the Troy boundaries. So there are team members that support those services that have identified disabilities. And then we have homebound, so students that for medical purposes typically cannot attend school. They are required to still have access to the curriculum and to their instruction in special ed services. Troy has a wonderful leadership team. So those are the leadership team members there that really help coordinate and support the IEPs and the students and the families and the staff members coordinating all of these services together. So Allison Mason really does everything all early childhood. So we have that that really wide continuum in Michigan of birth through preschool. Sarah had said, the birth to 3 is really like pushing into the home. So it's all over the community that these providers are really supporting families. And then the preschool setting is those 3 to 5 year olds. And so she's working through evaluations, case intakes, referrals, all of those pieces. Chris Olson does everything quality and compliance to really support our teams and the district in that capacity. Erica Conklin supports our behavior support coordinator. So there's a big team that works to support all the unique needs of our students to support their access to the general education and those pieces in the school setting. Teresa Bruno, it does the Troy Center for Transition Coordinator. So she kind of looks at how do when we think of gen ed in the K through 12 environment or access to the general education, you think of the classroom, the school community. She's really focused on how do our students, our young adults, access the larger community. So how are they getting out into the community, getting jobs, practicing those work skills, and really being having meaningful participation as community members. Zach Downer is our transition coordinator, and he works with the teams to really start doing those preparations prior to graduation, whether they're going to Troy Transition Center or graduating with a diploma or whatever it may be, really helping families and teams start to plan and prepare students for that post-secondary life. And then there are a large amount of paraeducators, program assistants, student support aides, and job coaches that help everything run and give all these students the amazing support that they need to be in buildings and fully access their school community and the larger community and those job sites. So if we look at, we're going to kind of take a journey and look at some of our programs specifically and look at some of the numbers. So we'll start with the babies and the early childhood team. So when you look at the different ways in which we support, we've already talked early on is that birth to 3. We're out in the community, we're in homes, really focusing on parent support. If you look at the chart there, you can see 2022, there was 33 families that were being supported, and now we have 38 families. When you look at that preschool, trajectory, you see that in our ECP classrooms, so those are those half-day programs, those are for students that have those more complex needs that maybe a full day of preschool is not a great match for them, but having a half-day program with some more embedded supports in their preschool program is a better match. And so that you can see the jump from 50 to 62 students that we're supporting in that program. 1755 services are more like an umbrella service. So there's teacher, there's ancillary supports, and they kind of work together either as a team or sometimes it might just be a speech only kid. But those particular services are either walk-in, it could be pushing into the gen ed preschool classroom. There's a lot of different ways those services can be provided, and the growth there, again, 12 to 18. And then you have the itinerant speech, which has gone up from 59 to 54. And so for those speech only kiddos that get those walk-ins. And then when you look at the continuum of services that Sarah's talked about, this is something that I think Troy does really well from somebody that's new to the district. I think that coming in and seeing all of the programs and services and the layers of support that students and staff have to be able to provide the very best for students is absolutely amazing. And I think this chart really reflects the work that has been, the intentional work that has been done over the years to make sure that our students get to stay in their community. And that's really the priority, is we want to make sure that students get the education that they need in their school community. And although there are wonderful supports in our county, we have programs for emotional impairments. There's segregated programs for that. Oakland County has programs for deaf and hard of hearing. Wing Lake and I can't think the other one. Thank you. Kingsley have programs for students with severe multiple impairments called SXI programs, and all districts in Oakland County have access if we feel the needs of the student would be better served in those environments. And you can see in 2009, 2010, we really had to reach out to the county programs to help us program for those students. I act like I was there in 2009, 2010. But Troy was reaching out a lot for help to figure out how to program for those students. And you can see by widening the continuum and adding the support structures that are in place now, we only have 21 students that we're needing to kind of cast a wider net to be able to program for. So I think that's a huge testimony to the work that's been done.
All right, so my 3 slides are kind of getting into the nitty gritty, all the numbers. That might be a little hard to digest on the slides, but this top table is our Troy data for our students in special education. So that's the percent of the total population of our district that are eligible in these certain categories. There's 13, if you see down the left column, there's 13 different eligibility categories in special education that students can be eligible for services. So if you see in Troy, we have the largest numbers of students with autism, specific learning disability, speech and language impairment, and then otherwise health impairment. Below that is total student count. So the state, Oakland schools, and then Troy. So total head count for special ed in the state, you can see that's a very large number, but look at the percentages. Oakland schools, average percentage, 12.7% of all students. In Troy, we have, as Sarah mentioned earlier, 1,367 students with IEP. So that's 11% of our total population, 11.1%. Broken down a little bit further below is that autism, specific learning disability, speech and language impairment, other health impairment, those are our largest percentage of eligibility categories here in Troy. So you can see that if we look at the very bottom, so Troy, our total headcount is for special ed 1367. For ASD, we have 254 students. This was last year's data that are eligible for special ed, and that's 18.6% of our total special education population. Looking next, LD, 18.9%, speech and language, 30%, and then otherwise health impairment, 15.4%. You can see above that is the Oakland County percentages. So the biggest one to point out is if you look back to the left at ASD. So the statewide average is 13.5% of students in all special ed. Open schools is at 14.6, and us here in Troy are at 18.6% of all of our special ed students are eligible as ASD. So that brings us into the next slide. So
What's an example of other health impairment?
So it could be a student's eligible for special ed because of a medical diagnosis that gets in their way of accessing curriculum. So that could be for ADHD. So because they have limited alertness and a limited ability, stamina to. So yeah. So there could be a variety of medical diagnoses, but ADHD is definitely the biggest one that we would look at.
Okay.
Okay. Great question.
Okay, if you go back one slide, can I ask you one question? So I noticed that we have a bigger percentage of students that have speech and language impairment. Do we attribute any of those, or do we diagnose that students who don't speak English well as to be that, or if they are different lingual?
We shouldn't be doing that. All of our evaluation teams have, went through some training with open schools in the past about how to tease out whether it's an English as a second language or a true, speech and language impairment. And so that shouldn't be why we're seeing that, discrepancy there, the higher percentage, of speech and language rather than open schools. So, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure the reason behind that. But I don't, it shouldn't be attributed to the English as a second language, to our multilingual learners.
Okay.
On the slide, we just have those percentages to make it. Oh, yeah, they have a little bit of,
editing to the slides that are not up here. So this looks at eligibility over time, and then as Sarah stated earlier, move-in data. So across the top, we're looking at the year 2014, 15, 2021, and then 24, 25. We should have done that slides ago.
Yeah.
Here's the page.
What we're doing. Oh, he doesn't want to be the slide.
Well, we made some edits that were updated on the presentation that was being projected.
Yeah, but here we really wanted to be able to show you the Troy percentage, which is in parentheses. How that's grown over the years. So that's the total number of special education percentage of our population over the course of those three.
Yep, so that top row, as we just said, is the percentage of our special education population. So starting on the left, went from 8.8% up to 11.1%. Again, we broke this down into our three largest eligibility categories. So if you look at ASD eligibility, in 2014, 2015, we were at 10.6%. All the way to last year, we were at 18.6%. That was from that slide previously. So that is a very large jump over the course of 10 years. For LD, we actually went down. So in 2014, 15, we were at 33.7%, down to 24, 25, 18.9%. Sarah mentioned earlier, we were talking about this, that back in 2014, 15, it's my understanding that there wasn't a strong MTSS process. And so now that there is a very strong MTSS process, our number of students that are eligible as LD is going down.
Yeah, can I ask a question about that? Because we just had a state complaint in the spring. And our MTSS process was found to basically be in violation of child fine. And this data was actually referenced in the state complaint. So
The complainant did reference this data. The outcomes of the state complaint did result in a corrective action plan. There's always reflection and learning that can be done when
you know, if we're not doing something, if we need to tweak what our process is, which we have. But the outcome of the state complaint was that we needed to have a consistent process, K-12, that everyone was aware of, and that there was professional learning around and things like that. Yes, you are correct there. So, and the process has been updated at this point.
Do you think not now, but do you think at some point we could get information on like how the
That process works.
like what that, or what did you change to meet the correct
Sure.
actions?
Yes, I'd be happy to share that. Yeah, no problem.
Looking at speech and language impairments over the course of the last 10 years, actually started at 27% in 1450, went up, and then came back down again for 24-25 to still at 30.7% of our overall special ed population. Below this is our level 4 programming needs. So as Sarah mentioned in a previous slide, we currently have 20 programs for students, our level 4 programs. If you look back 2018-19, we only had 7 to 12 to 15, and now we're all the way at 20 level 4 programs. So our increase in students with ASD across all of those years is the reason why we have such an increase in program for our level 4 need students. Below that, the move-in data. So Hillary and I started this year on new supervisors in special ed with 66 plus move-ins. So those are new students that move into Troy with IEPs. 23 of those students, 23 of the 66 needed a placement in a categorical program.
And can I just add, like, when they're moving in, it doesn't always mean that they moved in from like Birmingham, or it means that they could have been not in school for several years, or never in school, or they were on homebound, or they were in a hospital setting, they were in another country, or they were in another state. So there's a lot of complexity that comes in with trying to figure out how does it translate to not only Troy, but Michigan and bigger systems of supports.
Right, so that process, as Hillary just mentioned, sometimes was easy. It was, we would like program the students coming from Lake Orion. They're in resource room with speech, easy peasy. Other students had never been in school, were from other countries, didn't speak English, had never been in school before, were 6, 7 years old. That's kind of that right side number. Of those 66 students, 7 students needed immediate evaluation for programming purposes. So those were students who, as Hillary mentioned, weren't in school, maybe came from full-time ABA therapy and had never been in a school setting. Can't think of other reasons for those stuff.
I think that's probably, or the parent just didn't have them going to preschool.
Yeah.
Just chose, have them attend preschool, and when they came on the first day of school or at their kindergarten event, the team immediately, the principal was reaching out to say, well, we need to help this family, we need to help this child, they need evaluation right now. And so we worked, Hillary and Jamie and I worked closely with those teams and those principals to make sure that those students are receiving the services that they need. Yeah.
So if a kid has always been in Troy and never, did not attend kindergarten and now showed up in, let's say, potentially first grade with potential IEP, why would they be called transfer students?
They're not necessarily. I see your question. So that maybe should have been its own row in the presentation. I was trying to just put it up on top of that they weren't necessarily a transfer student, but they
Required immediate.
didn't have an IEP.
But did the 66 include those
No.
type of students?
No.
No, they did
No.
not. Okay.
Nope.
But there could be situations where a family was offered an IEP or services at one point, and then maybe turned down those services for whatever reason and chose to do another, whether homeschool or something else, and then came back. And because there was a historical evidence that they did have a disability at some point, we have to honor that. And it could be like 5 years. It could have been that they.
Or a non-public service plan.
Or a non-public service plan. So there are situations where that child already has protective rights walking into the school that we have to honor, even though we have very little data to understand what their needs are.
Can you explain what non-public does that mean they go to a private school in Troy?
Yeah, like Field Academy, for example, is one of our non-public schools that we service. So students who have, they have a non-public service plan. So we provide services, not necessarily programming, like a resource room program or a categorical program, but we have a teacher consultant, a social worker, a speech pathologist, and an OT and a PT that, as the non-public service plan specifies, our teams go into that building.
Into Brookfield and help
Yeah.
out? I
Yeah.
see. So if it's also, let's say, a preschool or a school that's inside a church or outside church or something, you have to do that too?
They have to be an approved non-public by the state, by the
Okay.
NDE. So I think we have 3 approved non-publics in Troy that we go into. So it's not every
I see.
private school, they have to be approved within the NDE. Yeah.
I noticed you show your transfers just for this year. Do you have historical data there too? Like you're moving over, like how you did this one? Or
I do have that. I could get it. I
it'll
don't.
be interesting
Yeah.
to see, is that also pointing it out to us? Because there's a lot this
Sure.
year. Is that like a lot every year or just?
Yeah, I went back and looked actually at last year's data and it looked like, so usually our move-ins trickle down in terms of how many we're having enroll around September, like middle of September, late September, and they usually stop with maybe a one-off like around January. So last year in January, it looked like we had around 70 total. So I don't know exactly what we were in October, but we could get that data. I think the biggest point here is, yeah, not necessarily, yes, we have a high number of students who have transferred here, who have moved in. The number of students that have needed that 23 number up there and then the 12 next to that is where we are really feeling it, I would say, and where that's really having an impact. Because that is, and I can pull that data as well, but that's, I know from my own experience that is a much higher number than we have had in the past. Yeah.
So the 12 students that have been placed in a level 4 program, so I think Sarah mentioned earlier, those were our programs for students with autism. So if our eligibility percentage for ASD has gone up over the years, and we opened 2 new level 4 programs last year, that didn't take into account the 12 students that moved in. So as Sarah said earlier, thankfully we opened those programs. But on top of that, we have now added 12 new students this year that required that level 4. A level 4 program, elementary through high school.
Is there like a limit on how many students you can have in a program?
There is, yes. We typically keep our level 4 programs around 7. A few of them have 8 right now. But we try and keep them around 7 or 8. The actual law allows us to go, the county program code allows us to go higher than that, but because of the needs of the students, and the complexities of just running a successful program, with those kinds of characteristics, we try and keep them lower. An ASD program, just for context, if it was an ASD coded program, they have to stay at 6. So that's 6 at elementary, 7 at secondary, sorry.
When you see, like I see the number increasing, is that kind of to show that we're having like more kids with, that population is growing of students?
Yeah, I think it could be, I think that probably is a big piece of it. I think Troy is a sought out area for for families who have students with significant autism. I think the district, I think the department, as you saw back on the slides about our service providers that we have and the level of behavior support that we have. I think that we have a very strong reputation to be world-class for all students, but also for our students who have significant complex needs. I think we've had people, parents, when we contact them to do their transfer IEP and talk to them about that process and welcome them to the district, who have said, who communicated that to us. So I think it's kind of layered.
The real takeaway here is the county deliberately in the 9-10-ish school year, shortly thereafter, made a decision to have local school districts pull back students. So that's why you see that sharp decline in countywide programming to where we are today. To Hillary's point, our team has done a really nice job planning for and accommodating those students that are coming to us. The real challenge that we face right now is where back in 9-10, many of the students that we're currently servicing now would be in a program based upon their behaviors, based upon the needs are in our buildings now. And absolutely, we're programming for them, we're accommodating them. But it puts a significant amount of pressure on both from a human resource standpoint, from a space standpoint, to the point now at every elementary at we're closing it on 2 categorical rooms. A categorical room is 6 to 7 students, 2 a teacher, 2 paraprofessionals, and likely multiple aides that are within that room supporting those students. So we're providing the support as is needed. But as the county has pushed back and we have accommodated, we're getting to kind of critical mass here where, and you'll see the budgetary impact in just a moment, we're getting to critical mass here where I think it's important for us to start the conversation about what is an appropriate balance for students with special needs and where can they best be supported while we continue to support students locally as best we can. And so this is why I really think it's a conversation that goes beyond this table with your colleagues or colleagues across the county and through local schools. I mean, there are other counties that do it differently. We're going to continue to provide services for our students without question. But there does come a point where we're going to continue to struggle to meet the needs of some very complicated youngsters. I mean, it's not the number so much. It's the level of complication that these youngsters bring with them. A youngster maybe who hasn't been in school, hasn't never been in school, and is 6-7 years old, and presents with significant behavioral needs. The time and effort necessary to moderate those behaviors, get those behaviors in line so that that student can be in a gen ed setting in order to provide that gen ed support with peers. It's just very complicated. So that's why I want to just raise your level of awareness with respect to that so we can start these conversations.
I can only assume that that number is going to continue to grow.
It's going to continue.
I don't think it's going to get.
It's not good.
You know what I mean? And then that stretches our staff, stretching our capacity.
There's a human resource component to this, and there's a fiscal component to this budgetary component. We're very fortunate to be fully staffed right now. But as human resource is stretched based upon issues that occur, it's not unusual to see staff choose to go into a gen ed setting, for instance, where maybe it's a little bit, the behaviors are different.
Well, just for perspective for board members who don't have an education background, like what is your caseload ratios like otherwise? So you like Rich described, a categorical classroom, 7 kids, a teacher, a couple aides, a para maybe, whatever. So you've got a resource program in a building. What's your resource caseload? How many students does a resource teacher serve in, say, elementary, middle, high?
18 to 22.
So it's like having 18 to 22 single student classes. And then how about social work? You have 20, people would be like, wow, you have 26 social workers. That's a whole bunch. But what's their caseload?
They probably, in terms of IEP and MTSS supports, I would say 50-ish, 40 to 50 students. Speech paths, probably 45 to 60. We have a couple of speech paths who have reached out to Hillary and I recently with concerns about their caseload teetering over 60 and their ability to, effectively service those students. So yes, the needs are high. And on those caseloads are some very complex students that might not be in a program even. So it is all of our service providers are stretched.
Like that, our gen ed teachers are stretched too. attempting to integrate kids who need to integrate. On the first chart that you showed us from MDE, you know, that consultative piece. Yeah, like our gen ed teachers, do they have what they need to be able to, you know, sort of partner with the rural teacher to make sure that those kiddos, when they are spaced, can be appropriately in a classroom. Everyone's successful.
Yeah. So when you say caseload though, so let's say if there is a gen ed student but needs consultation or needs some supplemental work, will those two students come under the caseload of your
The special ed provider.
special ed
If they
provider
have
as
an
well?
IEP, yep, if they have an IEP, there's always an identified primary caseload manager. That's the person, who is providing a direct service to the student, but also who is responsible for ensuring IEP implementation, ensuring that partnership with the gen ed teacher, that those, that they're having that communication back and forth, ensuring that the IEP is, like, when there's an IEP, that they're sending the invite to the parent, responsible for all of the implementation pieces.
But any gen ed student who has a consult or supplement will have an IEP, right?
Yes, through the MTSS process, some students receive a level of consultation from an intervention partner or something along those lines where they don't have an IEP.
Don't have an
Social
IEP.
work might push in to do some consultation with the student or the gen ed teacher. Yes, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Oh, it's me, sorry.
But yeah.
Oh, forgot.
Sorry.
He's driving.
Oh, forgot. So Sarah mentioned our PAC. I think Hillary and I have been very excited to be a part of this in Troy. We've had a couple meetings already and they're very positive and collaborative. And you can see our executive board members, Rebecca Bilke is one of our own Troy teacher consultants in the district, and she's on the executive board along with two parents. The whole mission of the PAC is to collaborate with parents and staff and be support partners for one another. We've had one meeting so far. I think we had five maybe will attend, which I have heard in the past. Sometimes no one attended. We're flip-flopping virtual and in-person, trying to meet the needs of everyone. If you need childcare, you can attend virtually. There's building representatives in almost every building. I think it's just a very positive and collaborative PAC, and that's not always the way that it is. And I think that they're working very hard to be that for our community. So we're excited about it.
And is this PAC a new thing or we've had it for several years?
Well, we've had it prior to, I would say, 2020. We were higher functioning, I would say, more regular meetings, more participation from parents. And then it has been very difficult to get things back and up and running. For a few years after that, we partnered with Celebrate Hope, which is an organization that helps facilitate some trainings, does also really helped us with doing hosting some parent social events where it was an opportunity for parents to come and just be social in the community with each other. We heard from the parent community that wasn't necessarily something that they wanted to continue with. And so we switched things up last year a little bit, and just had continued with this, framework. I don't think we had as much, excitement maybe from the executive board at that point, because they were just learning themselves. And so there was a lot of learning taking place on all of our parts, us getting to know them, them getting to know us. And then we only offered but we had 4 meetings. They were all virtual. And the feedback that we received was the timing wasn't necessarily conducive to our parent community. And they were seeking some different topics, I guess, for those sessions. So we're revamping again, coming back to the table, and hopefully we're hoping for, with the opportunity to be virtual and in person, rotating monthly, hopefully having some guest speakers, and that will have some, get some momentum going. So our focus, 2025 goals and focus areas, just
in general, ensure that all students, regardless of ability, have equitable access to high quality instruction and supports by continuing to foster those inclusive practices. So what you'll see on that right side there, that top picture is, I'm not sure if you're aware, but all of our elementary buildings, the last 2 years actually have embarked on the unified sports path for categorical programs. And so they have peer partners that come in, and the first year that they did it, they only did practice bowling, which was 2023-24. They did practice bowling in their own buildings, and then at the end of the year, they took a big field trip to the bowling alley. Last year, we were able to provide them with opportunity to do some field trips to each other's buildings. And so they did practice sessions, but they also had other teams, other building teams come and participate. So that was a picture of that. That's a really amazing opportunity. It is completely funded through Unified Sports. I mean, they granted us quite a bit, I think $14,000. To be able to provide that for our elementary buildings. And it was just an amazing experience. So once we get that scheduled this year, I'll make sure that you have it in case you ever want to go and visit another bowling sessions. Dr. Macheski and I were pretty frequent visitors to those events. So they were a lot of fun. Our secondary buildings do unified as well, but middle schools did bowling, and then our high schools, you can see below there, are the unified basketball teams from Troy High and Athens. So I kind of broke, when we were talking about this, we kind of broke it down into our goal and focus areas for our students who who are on the diploma, who are seeking, receiving their diploma. And so that first bullet just talks about, as you all know, we have continued to build partnership and alignment with teaching and learning through the MTSS, but also for us to be able to hone in and focus on our special ed programming and giving our teachers and educators professional learning opportunity and intensive intervention delivery so we can continue to see progress for all of our students. And then that second one is broken down a little bit more to focus in on our students with those more complex needs, the students who have probably placement in those 44 categorical programs that we talked about, just to continue to, we always presume competence for all students. And so, and that is a foundation for us in the department, but making sure that we're holding them to high expectations as well, and supporting those evidence-based practices, ensuring collaboration with staff, and providing those inclusive opportunities. So, and then the other goal is just around, as Jamie was just talking about, the PAC, and increasing family engagement, and support and resources for our community. And then I think Dan is going to take it from here, talking about some special ed budget and funding.
Yes, we wanted to share with you just some trend data with respect to funding. So, yeah, being armed with some specific data around this is helpful when you're talking with, because dollars tend to make more sense to folks. When you're talking to them, especially policymakers, they seem to respond more closely to those things.
I do my best to other kind of impression over here. Well, it's all for me, but. So I'll just go over this briefly. I'm not going to go over every number. I think this is a good visual. Sarah, you had a similar document that we kind of recreated for her, but we also wanted to include the prior 4 years beyond last year as well, just to give some historical context to this picture. So really, let's start at the top real quick. So the revenue sources are on top, expenses on the bottom, and then this kind of nets out to a general fund subsidy, if you will, of how much more the general fund has to pick up. So not only do we get general fund state aid dollars for all of these students, but we also get special ed dollars to go above and beyond the general requirements. So in the green up there, that's our state aid component. So there's two parts to what we get in state aid. 51C is the bulk of it. So you can see there, the around $7 to $9 million over the last 5 years is what we get above and beyond the traditional foundation amount. And then the prior year reimbursement that relates to transportation and instructional support services. So we get reimbursed each year. So if you were to add up, like for this year, if you add around 8.9 from last year plus the 601, you're going to get this year's fully funded amount. So what that is every year about this time, about 2 weeks ago, actually, we submitted last year's information. So busing, that's where with our first student contract, we worked really hard with them to understand rather than just breaking it out, maybe bumping special ed up a little more. Let's hone in that cost a little bit more because we get 70% reimbursement on those special ed transportation costs. So we made sure that that amount that we paid for special ed route was more appropriate because we do get some of those dollars back. So we should anticipate a higher prior year reimbursement next year. So, and then we get about 28% on the instructional side.
So that special ed transportation, is that like a special grant that you have to submit and you get the money?
So think of it like a reporting, anything that is not grant funded, that our general fund picks up through these dollars. Whatever we report each year that wasn't paid for by a grant,
You get
we
that
get
back.
reimbursement the following year. So transportation 70%, instructional support services about 29%. Yeah.
And Dan, does that only reimburse if it's through a bus contractor? Because I know in the past we've had cases where we pay parents to drive their kids. Is that reimbursable through this or not?
So it can be either in-house busing or a contracted service. Things like reimbursing a parent would not be reimbursable under this report that we submit, but the key, and I think the benefit of how our buses are structured in Troy is our special ed buses are 100% special ed.
Yeah.
If you use that bus for one gen ed route, it's ineligible for the whole year. So we need to make sure that our buses are fully dedicated and not split in any way, which they are. So it makes it a lot easier for us to report, knowing that those buses, which are typically set up with equipment and harnesses, things like that, they're more geared towards those students. So any of those costs then flow into this reimbursement. So as much as we can, it's a balance of making sure we plug things into the appropriate grants, but also recognizing we have a maintenance of effort to meet every year across the county. So we want to make sure that we're meeting our obligations from a county perspective, but also understanding that we are going to get some of those funds back subsequent years. So like Sarah and I talked about yesterday with special ed, everything is compliance and mandate. So we don't really have as much of a choice to say, well, I'm not going to fund that because I just don't have money. You have to fund it and then you figure it out later. So the orange there, PA 18 county millage, so that's Oakland County levies a special ed millage tax, just like they do on the vocational ed side. So that's the money that we get from the county. It's about $180 million across the county that gets split up between all the districts. So our share there this year coming up is about, again, around that $11.8 million mark.
Dan, that amount, is that based on the number of students in special ed? Also, does it also account for the complexity of the situation of the student or no?
I don't know how in depth it goes. I think it's just total number of students with disabilities, and then you get a percentage. Like we're between 6 and 7% of the allocation across the county based on our needs here. And then the red here, that's section 54D. That's a grant for early on, so that's a fairly new grant. But again, it's something that the ISD does facilitate. So we do have an early on. Is it BCBA?
That's a part C, so or early on, you can, our part C families that don't, there's a level of, that is almost based on level of need, I would say is the easiest way to describe that for our early on families. So there's part of 0 to 3. Yeah, that's 0 to 3. So that is something that came to be for last school year. The county used to provide service for our Part C families that weren't fully eligible for an IFSP. We took those families back, and what that did was give us Oakland Schools. The county gave us this grant to fund that.
So those are kind of the two county grants that involve special ed. And then the yellow here, that's our federal grants, which is primarily IDEA. So you get a flow through grant that's for all of our special ed K through 12. And then the preschool portion is for our preschool students. And then proportionate share is an amount that we're legally required to work with the private schools within our district boundaries to ensure that we're providing them with services to meet those students' needs as well. So you can see a historical context there, just under $3 million. And then Medicaid reimbursement, that's just all based on the amount of Medicaid billings that we submit for that.
Is that mostly for equipment?
Medicaid billing? No, that's for direct service.
That's cool.
direct service, so our
Direct
service providers can bill for Medicaid. As long as if the family is eligible, so they run a report every month and it shows up who's eligible on their caseload and then they can bill for those students.
Oh, and then the same thing with, state aid reimbursement and following year, when we do Medicaid billing, we have to back out the grant funded portion of that position. And then we're able to bill the remaining balance to get some type of reimbursement for it.
One question about Medicaid, I see the trend going down, the number of dollars getting it. Is it because our number of families being eligible has come down, or is it because
Medicaid pools.
yeah, or because Medicaid is not paying much, is that?
That's a good question. I could find that information out. I don't know the answer right to
That's based on the exact service provided, so depending on a given year, there's gonna be a fluctuation to it.
And parents have the right to opt out.
They do,
Just say,
yeah.
even if we do get Medicaid, you can't ask to bill for it.
Yeah, and every IEP a parent has to sign if they want the team to be able to bill or not.
Okay.
And then down here, expenditure, so we have different funds across the district, general fund, all our capital projects funds, we maintain a special ed fund too. So all of our funds, it's very easy for us to identify what is special ed fund based on the function code at the state level. So for us, we break out essentially what was our costs within the special ed fund. And then inside of the general fund, we have the transportation costs, but we do break it out by special ed as well. So we pull that cost into the general fund, and then these are within the grant fund. That's the federal portion, which matches all your revenues and expenditures. So all in all, you can see for this past school year, about a $9 million deficit, if you will, of revenue compared to expenses for us. I have a different slide that might show the trend of what this looks like. So this one, I think, just kind of highlights when you look at the green and the blue, that's your state aid, your county millage. Those are all based on numbers, right? So it's natural that you're going to see that go up over time, especially as state aid comes in and we're getting more money from the prior year expenditures. And then here's more with federal and the Medicaid there is it's been pretty stagnant. I mean, that's always been the conversation of fully funding IDEA. So I think that really highlights those two federal pots of money. And then obviously the ISD grant there is really new, so that's been pretty stable too. But we thought it's kind of a good visual to highlight that difference between the state is trying to help out as much as they can, but the feds really haven't come in and funded that IDEA portion.
Can you do us a favor, if you go back the 2 slides where you showed the deficit, would you be able to get us a number per student that is in special ed? Maybe to get a more, like how much more per pupil in special ed, actually, to see how much more we spend on them than what we get from the state and federal.
Yeah, we can update this with the per pupil area, just to avoid that.
An interesting number to experience.
So I thought, right as I was rushing out today, that I saw a headline that said something along the lines of state budget funds rose at the expense of autistic children. Do we know enough about what's gone, the details of that?
I just
State
see that
budget.
headline, something with them ending funding for an ASD
Yeah,
service.
and would that be a categorical or are they?
It wasn't a school service, I think it was outside of school.
Oh,
Yeah, but I did see that they did eliminate it. She's like,
Puts more pressure on the inside.
right,
Families are like, well, we can't get support outside. Your turn.
but that wasn't school.
no, I think it was like a private funding source, maybe through different ASD centers or something. I know there's like sensory centers or good news, it's like that, so.
Okay, yeah, I just caught the headline, didn't, can't change.
That's all I'm saying.
Did its job that caught you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And now we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
So the.
So I have a question-
Go ahead, Anita.
I have a question about looking at all those numbers, and I know I haven't had a, chance to see what information is out there yet. So, I mean, the foundation allowance for this year is going up, but what do, the categories like the special ed section 51C, do we have any indication of if that's up, down, and did they just roll all, a lot of that into the into the foundation allowance?
Yeah, there's no change. It's gonna be the same amount of an increase as the foundation this year, so there's no change to the section 51C special ed funding.
It's $500 something increase, right?
442.
442.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. This is really just trying to highlight that gap between revenues and expenses, so you can kind of see over time it's slowly increased.
Yeah, so I think you can accurately say it's about a 9 million, it's been for the last several years, it's been a $9 million delta between that the general fund has subsidized special education, the lack of special education funding.
And the question earlier about, is any of that money for the complexity of students? It's not. It doesn't take
So
into
it's a
account
standard, it's a
the
standard for number.
7 adults we have per
The
classroom.
fact that our ASD population has gone
Yeah.
up and our other populations maybe.
Now, the SFRC, that study did attempt to look at special education transportation and looked at special education categories and attempted to put a number on the cost associated, a factor, right, to educate a student with speech and language is far different than a student with ASD. And so they did attempt to put kind of a factor on that from a funding standpoint for the purposes of legislation or the legislators to see just how much more challenging it is. And if you have a student with severely multiple impaired, significantly more and so forth, so.
At the previous budget, they did consider looking at SFRC. I don't think they even talked about it during this budget. There's bigger issues they were looking at. Or more.
I have a question, maybe a Dan question. The $9 million, do we know like what that is? Do we always charge the same things to the general fund, or how does, so if we were to say, well, the $9 million is staff or is, what is it, you know?
The way that's made is we're charging all the expenses for like our special ed fund.
Okay.
But the revenue covers essentially 3 funds. It's covering the general fund plus the special ed fund and then the grant fund too. So the revenue we receive is assigned to one, but it's really intended to cover all. And so we're just essentially breaking out the known revenues that are specific to special ed. Yeah.
But you could assume that the majority of that cost is staffing, right?
Yeah, it's our cost, yeah.
So that, but within our budget itself, majority of the cost is staffing, and when you look at
90%.
the ratio, it's really compounded when we're talking about special education.
So IEP team. With huge things and nice to support the student success.
We as a board are well aware that special ed is an achievement gap we're serious about.
Yeah.
And seek to close it every way possible. So
Yeah.
knowing that you have funds to do the best work you can do and to do the training you set forth as your goals.
Right, and the people who do it.
All right, well,
Thank you, Sandra.
Other questions for Sarah, Hillary, or Jane? Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having us.
Appreciate it.
Jeez.
Really informative. Like I said, I think this is the first since I have been. I remember I met with you and in person,
Yeah.
learned a lot at that time,
Yeah.
but this is the first.
Yeah, I haven't done that for things like Dr. Macheski said back when Jessica was, I think it was 2022 or 2023. So,
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and then get back for our book discussion. So Nina, we're gonna take a quick bio break here.
She already did. She turned off her camera. Oh, there she's back again.
Yeah.
So we want to divide into two groups, correct?
Yeah, I think it's a small enough group. We divide it into two groups. Chris and John will join, I'll join. I think you get more conversation that way more quickly.
Yeah.
It's small,
So
small.
we just want to sort of divide that.
Yeah, sure. Maybe take half
Yeah.
one way and half the other.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
What do you do? What do you do with me?
You're not invited.
we'll put you in one.
You're in your position.
Yep,
You'll be Matt's elbow partner.
Yes.
Yeah.
When the laptop.
John, you comes join and.
John and Chris will join as well. And
Oh, this.
so we put a real simple protocol. Here's what, so what, now what protocol. It's very simple, just designed with some prompts designed to get the group talking. And
Did the meeting work or no?
and Amina, I will send this to you right now.
I can take a picture.
Yeah, take a picture.
Yeah, I'll take a picture. I'll text it to you.
So we just thought if the groups want to come together, spend about 30 minutes going through some of these prompts, gathering some information, and then bring it back to the larger group and we'll share out.
I can even call Matt and then we can, I can be on my phone and talk to my group.
Yeah.
Well, you're with the whole, so you're gonna be with, John, Audra, Matt, and Amina.
And
I mean,
Michelle.
excuse me, Raquel.
Okay, it can be Amina too.
So you're with five and then the rest of us, there's five of us, the other side. So you're
Yeah,
not
but
just
that way
with
I'm
us.
not yelling at you guys, from the wall.
Yeah. How do we do that?
Go to.
We go to another room?
Technically, I don't know that you can't. Meeting, right?
Well,
You're right.
We're not talking about board stuff? I don't know.
Because both of you over here. This is the board meeting.
Stay, if you've got a meeting right here with us.
And then, if, there's chart paper and whatever, if you guys wanna sort of record, unless you just wanna do it out of your shoe.
The socks though. Or John, Amina, you want me to, I'll call you and you can be on speaker? Is that cool?
That might be easier than me like yelling from the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You heard.
Good for us to get right into the so what and.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
This is me. This is me.
Is that me?
No, those are crystals.
Hi, Dan.
So. You guys have a big number. We're gonna let you guys go first.
Well, Chris is our note taker. She has all of it.
Oh, wow.
So boring.
Yes, absolutely.
So under so what we talked about, the desire for engaged students,
What did I knock over?
kind of how that impacts all community members. It's not just impacting this one. Impacts the whole, the importance of exploring solutions for kids, furthering this, exploring ways to enhance a sense of belonging and kind of that idea about being, looking at passenger mode and achiever mode. Those are the most difficult to observe.
Unhappy achiever mode and passenger mode. I have two most difficult.
Talked about all sorts of ideas. Now what, kind of the idea of professional development, parent engagement or parent education pieces. What do we do when kids are missing school and how might we connect them? And then a variety of things under the idea of elective ideas, looking at ways to, what if, just bringing up the end, ways to consider like graduation requirements for perhaps like exploratory options, things like that. Thinking about orderly things at middle school so kids can have kind of a more robust, I guess, set of options in terms, instead of just what they get at semesters. And then how do we make sure that adults have a one-on-one kind of, each child has an adult to support them. So how do we structure that and make sure that it's solidified and not just kind of my own? In summary. That's kind of the highlights.
You do the last two?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's that?
Okay, so what, asking questions of educators, how are they engaging the educators, how are they creating opportunities to engage, creating that agency? Meeting with kids, meeting kids, and Nancy mentioned, the importance of meeting kids where they are, and talked a lot about the importance of, developing relationships and how we're demonstrating and providing opportunities to develop relationships and how that is so impactful on students. Even one adult creating a relationship can be the difference for that student moving from being a resistor, for instance, to being someone who cares to participate and so forth. Are we tracking symptoms to identify students, for instance, absences, behaviors, grades? Are we tracking those things that might help us identify students that are more challenged in terms of resistors and so forth? And I think we're moving towards doing that in more systematic ways. That's good. Providing opportunities to make connections, that goes back to the building relationships. And Nancy had mentioned something, that a lot of this is just treating young people like we would want to treat all people with humanity. It really just goes back into that relationship building. And then we really the conversation around the kind of now what, but providing opportunities to provide productive struggle for all students.